Hello, yes. I was joking with friends that while the rest of you get to come and talk about other people's children's problems, it was intimidating to have to stand up and talk about my own children's character flaws. But that is indeed what I'm going to do today. Let me introduce you to them. Really, if I could bring them here today, they would have been the best artifacts of our approach and philosophy and the curriculum that we've chosen, the methodologies. But I want to talk about a problem that they face, but I think all of us in this room and in our modern culture face today, and that is the ability to form good habits, but I'm going to narrow in on the habit of attention, and I'll explain why in a moment. But on face, if you think about, if we cannot attend, if we cannot see things right before us and give our full focus of the mind to something, how can we have moral discipline? How can we have moral attachments to begin with, and where would and how we go about helping our children develop this habit of attention also would have a lot to do with their ability for moral autonomy. And so I hope that you'll find it relevant for all of the sectors that you are representing today. I was a former public school teacher. My husband is a professor of philosophy. We didn't ever think we were going to homeschool until I learned about this Victorian woman from Britain, Charlotte Mason. And she is very big in homeschooling circles now. And I met a homeschooling family that I just thought, these kids are amazing. And they said, well, we use Charlotte Mason's philosophy. And I Googled that, and I was really sold on her ideas. And her entire philosophy is built on these 20 principles. But the first is very similar to Waldorf and Steiner's as well, is that the children are persons, and we need to approach them as this human person, not a slate to be written on, a bucket to be filled, even clay to shape in our image or some image that we think society would want, that they and then how we approach that person and what education is would be has to first think about respecting and not violating the personhood of the child, but then also trying to consider, well, how would a person learn something? We would know how to program a computer, right, or set up a system, but do systems really work with human persons? And Mason says that along this idea of children, here are my born persons, that a person, and this is our baby who is waiting for me at home, so I'll keep to the 15 minutes. A person is not built up from without, but from within, right? Because they are living, all external educational appliances and activities intended to mold his character are decorative and not vital. And I think that's an important thing to think about as we want to talk about character curriculum. We want to think about having educational assemblies, different things that we would do to try to teach children about character. How do we actually make that turn to helping it come from the inside out? And become a part of who they are. And that is where the difficulty lies. And Mason has quite a bit to say about this. Her first whole volume is on this character formation. She has a whole other volume called The Formation of Character. But what she says is that we begin with habits. And yes, she was a Victorian woman, and this was the mantra of the age of strengthening the will. But I feel like she redeems the idea because she saw something that was new at the time of seeing that the children were persons. And so how do you help them take these steps of self-control in a relational way? And I can go through the next slide. This idea of character being the action of the will, that slowly the the habits of the child will become the character of the man. And that character is this repeated and accustomed action of the will. So what does that look like? The habit of attention. At 6 p.m., I think all of you would agree there's probably not a whole lot I have to do to prove to you that our attention spans are decreasing, that your students that you're dealing with are often very scattered. Technology is doing so much that now they say the average attention span is actually 8 seconds, and a goldfish is 9. So how do we help a child to be able to focus for a sustained amount of time? And what Mason would say with this problem is actually where we have to begin all of a child's education. And we can't just do one intervention, right? Or teaching them about attention or these habits. The intervention then would be this entire approach. And if this was a Charlotte Mason conference, I would want to talk to you about all of these things that we do in our approach to build their habit of attention. But we do all of these things because, not just for the habit of attention, but all of the intellectual and moral and even physical habits that the child would develop. And so I'm going to just focus in, I think, as a good example, and the one here in the center, of what we do for picture study. But before I begin, I had wanted to say that the problem for attention was especially noted by professors of medical students. And I don't know, this has been written about quite a bit in the news, and so maybe you've come across this idea that more and more we have these very bright, gifted, they have been highly successful in high school, college, and now they're coming to do their medical studies, and they cannot attend to the patient. They cannot see what's there. And what huge moral ramifications are there from that very basic habit to be able to pay attention and to see. And so what I thought was interesting is that the solution that was created at the University of Pennsylvania, that's now been copied at Harvard and at Yale, is one that Charlotte Mason created. And I was able to meet with, bump into actually at the Museum of Art in Philadelphia with the creator at Penn. And he was waiting for his medical students to come to the art museum, and we were there with our homeschool students, and we had quite a bit to share. So for picture study, what we do, Charlotte Mason says that if we can introduce children to art, we have this effect on their development of a sense of beauty and their power of seeing. And we enrich them. So there where you see it's not just a habit of attention, which I saw recently there was a study that showed that children could play this certain computer game, get online, and they could build the attention span did increase for the child. But we would want to question, well, is that the right way to actually develop a human being? What other effects might we have if we sit a child in front of a computer just to work on their habit of attention? What happens if we begin to break children down into their faculties and see them not as a whole being, but the individual parts that and objectify them in that way? And so I chose this painting to show you today because the habit of attention is, in particular, one that is difficult for my son, who is 10 years old. And he is a typical boy that for most of his time, he would prefer to be outside, running around and climbing trees and playing in the woods. He is a real talker, like his dad, and has a hard time sitting still. And so in the homeschool room, just like your school rooms, where there is a lot going on, plus laundry and the phone ringing and grandma wanting to stop by to visit, right? The attention problems are there just as much, and maybe even more. we were concerned for him and wondered about how we were going to help him be able just to sit still and learn. And at the same time as we were doing what Mason says to do to build these habits, we do the work of the child's education. And that is when the habits develop. We don't do it external as an external apparatus. We were reading a book by Holling C. Holling, and my son, we got to the part where the ship is crashing and there was this picture, and he said, "Mom, I know this painting." And I said, "Well, buddy, this is called an illustration. It's not a painting." He said, "No, this is at the Museum of Art, Mom." And he was 6 years old at the time. And I said, "Okay, bud. All right, let me keep reading the story." And, we went on with the lesson for the day. Well, then that week, we were going to the art museum, and he said, "Mom, can I take you to the picture from the book?" And he took me by the hand. And if you've been to the Museum of Art, it's huge. He navigated through the museum without a map, had the whole place worked out, and he took me to this Winslow Homer painting. And it was uncanny, the difference, the similarities between these paintings. And so with picture study, what Mason has us do is we take just one artist a term, and we only study 6 of their paintings. And we study it by having the children look at it. We unveil the painting, and they study it in silence without any talking for about 3 minutes. And if we had a little bit more time, we wanted to have you do that today. And then we have them turn it over, and they describe what it is that they saw. And this is the same thing that these medical students are doing at Penn and Yale and Harvard, that to say, can you actually describe what it is that you see? Not what you think you see, what is really there. And so no art history is needed, no background in artistic study. If you have that, and that's part of what comes out into the painting, you share that in your narration. This approach is what we do in all of the subject areas. We have the children narrating their lessons, whether it's science or history, composer study, all of these different types of things. And so the effects that we have seen from doing this in a classroom is the habit of attention and memory. And, the list goes on and on of all of the things that are able to develop for the child. Yes, they can build up these pictures in their minds. They are able to sit still for longer periods of time. But because we're doing it not with a computer game, sitting them in front of a screen, they are actually become even more who they were meant to be and more true to themselves. They become more attuned to beauty. They find solace in beauty. They end up having a relationship with this painting because they just sit and stared at it. And that's where I wanted to I'll go to, I wanted to end with this painting because it's the one that we've done most recently. And I asked all of the parents in our group to send in pictures and talk to me about how picture study's going in their homes. And we're studying Giotto this term. And this is a fresco that he did that's in Assisi. And mother who has a little boy named David who has ADHD. He also struggles. He's on the autism spectrum. He's very sickly. He has large motor skills, but also he does occupational therapy for fine motor skills. She sent me his picture, and this is what it was. And when we started working with him 2 years ago, he said to his mom, "Mom, I just feel like I live in a bubble and I can't break out of it. And I don't know how to let other people in." And I thought it was interesting that really when he narrated this painting, he ended up in so many ways, I feel like he drew himself. So here's a close-up of the artwork, which really, if you, just for those few brief seconds that I had it there, you can have barely even seen this in the painting, but I blew it up for you to see what David was able to see. and have them side by side. And here again is a boy who has a hard time even forming letters, right? But the work that he did in getting the angles and this artwork, I thought was just a beautiful way to end the presentation of saying, look what happens when we work on their habits and we want to take into account the whole person, and that we don't just build attention, and you know, which will be great for their grades and all the other reasons we would want them to have the habit of attention. We actually help a child see themselves and have that time to work through these things.